Welcome to the Lone Zebra podcast, where I share my nitty-gritty health story and what I learned from the School of Hard Knocks. Things that doctors will never tell you. Hi, I'm your host, Diane Lalomia, and I'm glad you're here. We zebras need to stick together. Today is episode number 003 of the Lone Zebra. Today's episode is the Tapestry of Life. We'll be talking about being called to something greater than ourselves, how to look past our life and reach out to others and make a difference in everyone's life. Be the change you want to be in the world. Let's get started. One thing that is notably a trigger for mast cell activation syndrome, and I believe that any of the other chronic diseases will also notice a correlation between stress and worsening symptoms, making things a lot harder and our health impacted in a great way. This stress for me occurred several different times in my life, but the big one, the one that really kicked my butt, was in 2011. We lost our son to suicide. He chose to take his life on his 23rd birthday. The grief that I experienced was like none other ever in my life. I could feel the impact on my nervous system from the grief. Immediately afterwards, it felt like all my nerves were like on fire, like I was sizzling and hot and just ready to short out at any time. But at the same time, I felt numb. I didn't really feel any emotion. I just felt numb. I couldn't watch TV. I couldn't listen to any radio station. I couldn't take the sounds. Light was real intense. The sunlight was intense. I had to have sunglasses. I couldn't even be outside without heavy-duty sunglasses. Finally, I was able to start listening to music, but it was only classical music. There was something about the music that I could handle that I couldn't with other kinds of music. But it was a difficult time. That was in March of 2011, and I worked in the garden. That gave me some peace. I got the sunshine. I got to work in the dirt. Growing things and living things kind of gave me a chance to just be alone with myself and my thoughts and God. And later in the summer, probably August, I had noticed a lump in my breast. I waited for a couple of months without saying anything to anybody to see if it might just be some of those just temporary things that would go down and disappear. Wishful thinking, I'm sure. But it didn't. So I had it checked out. My nurse practitioner sent me in for a mammogram. I'm not too fond of mammograms. I've had maybe a couple in my life. But I do not expose myself to radiation unnecessarily. And I feel that mammograms are definitely useful when there is an opportunity to investigate further, such as when I had this lump, but to do it just once a year because they said to do it is not a good enough reason for me. No, you're frying your body. Why would you do that? So anyway, that's another rabbit hole. So I eventually got sent in. It got biopsied. and it turned out to be 100% mucinous carcinoma, according to the biopsy. I was told that was very rare. I was told that mucinous carcinomas of breast cancers are usually accompanied with a ductal breast cancer. They're usually a combination, but very, very rare occasions, 100%. The radiologist said, I would like, my wife got breast cancer. If she had to have it, that would be the kind I'd want her to get. That was supposed to make me feel better? No, I don't think so. The course of treatment was lumpectomy and radiation treatment. There was no chemotherapy recommended. I didn't really want to do all this, but I felt like if I didn't follow what was required by the insurance, the standard method of care or whatever, standard procedures, that I would be rejected for any other treatments and abandoned. So I decided to go the route that was recommended. I was still under a whole different thought process about health, medicine, and disease. So I went through the recommendations. The first radiation treatment, my diverticulitis issues with the lower intestines, the large intestines, started giving me incredible fits. I was experiencing some ravaging diarrhea and cramping and really bad GI system upset. So much that I canceled the next radiation treatment, and I wish I'd canceled all the rest. But I didn't. I went back. I did the treatments. I regret having done the treatments. I wish I had never exposed my body to that, but that's what they had recommended. Now looking back, I really and truly, deeply in my heart, believe that it was a reaction with mast cells to create a lump full of mucus in my breast as a response to the grief I had encountered and the stress on my body. I shouldn't have had to go through, definitely not the radiation, and I really kind of wonder and doubt that the surgery was actually necessary. Now I have 2 breasts. I still have my breasts, but they are 2 different sizes and 2 different heights. The breast that got the lumpectomy was tightened up and it sits higher. It's like my headlights aren't shining in the same direction. Thank you very much. So it is something I'm self-conscious of, and the lump taken out actually caused the one breast to be somewhat smaller. So my cup size is not the same, and when I tried to use an insert to fill in the area, it did nothing but slide around, and all I did was want to play with my bra, and it didn't look good in public. So it made me self-conscious on that too. So there wasn't really a happy ending on that one. But I've been down that road. I know what kind of fear you have when you get a cancer diagnosis. And I know what it's like to go through the treatments. I know what it's like to get done with the treatments. And I know what it's like to look back after I started waking up to the medical system. And I'll be getting into that more on a later date. But they really don't have your best interest in mind. Let me just go and say that. There are some good doctors out there that care. But the medical system, the medical schools, do not teach the doctors in Western civilization the kind of modalities that actually heal patients. The things that I discovered, my treatments were actually contraindicated and were bad for me, for mast cell, for histamine issues, for other reasons, for long QT syndrome. The drugs didn't work for me, they were bad for me, and no doctor wanted to listen. I had arguments with more than one doctor, and I'm just here to tell you, my experience has been not so good. I've realized the hard awakening when I laid in the hospital bed after I had recovered from my bustagut. And the cardiologist came in. It was one I'd never seen before. He was a tall, slender doctor, Marfan syndrome, which was what I originally had researched before before even Ehlers-Danlos was even a term. Marfan in the mid-90s was something I had run across working at the med center, teaching the second-year med students, pharmacology students, and perfusionist students. That was something that stood out, and I thought, my dad is tall and slender. So was this doctor. But anyways, I digress. What really is interesting is his question to me. He looked at my records and he asked me, you had congestive heart failure. I see that your ejection fraction is much increased and is normal now. How did you reverse congestive heart failure? I looked at him. I hesitated. And I told him, you won't like my answer. And he said, yeah, go ahead. I said, are you sure? And he nodded his head in the affirmative. So I proceeded to tell him. First and foremost, I pointed to the ceiling and I said, I have the great physician. The second thing I told him was I stopped taking your medicines. The third thing that I can attribute to it was I started working with a biochemist on my nutritional deficiencies. There was more to it, but I didn't go into any more details. He thought that was really interesting. And I asked him if he was, open to that. And he said, yeah, I'd like to learn more about that. I haven't heard from him since, other than to hear from his office. I don't even know that I've seen him, but maybe once since that day. And that's probably been 5 years. Reading from the book Women of Purpose, a daily devotional for discovering a meaningful life in Christ by Sarah Daigle. We're on day 24. Whoever finds his life will lose it, and whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. Matthew chapter 10, verse 29. ESV. The sun dipped low over the horizon of snow-blown fields, where long rows of cattle lined feeding troughs, chowing down in the dark coldness. I wanted to leave the car and run through the frozen sagebrush, sit in the snow, tune in to all things wild and earthy, and listen for the sound of howling coyotes. Their sound sweeps me with simultaneous dread and delight. I've a love-drenched heart for these fields where once we lived in a old farmhouse desperately in need of paint and a new roof. There a moose ambled across the lawn one day before he disappeared over the hill of yet one more fertile wheat field. There coyotes howled at night and owls wooed in the trees outside our bedroom window. And there our son learned to love country. His heart has never sunk into marine life as it has into earth, fields, and farm. Living on the water's edge hasn't called his soul out as those ageless, rolling hills once did. It takes something special to call our souls, something beyond ourselves, something vast and wonderful. Sometimes what we look for within ourselves is only found apart from ourselves. If we save our own puny lives, we end up with nothing but our own lonely, desolate selves. If we break into sacrificial love, we gain dividends of love in return. The rich in heart were never brought to satiation of soul by hanging on to their own small lives and self-protection. When our hearts contain only ourselves, we end up with just that, a brittle, shallow, small heart with only enough room for our own narrow thoughts. Our hearts desire to be called into something greater than ourselves. The essence of this greatness is love, is God. Break into given love. Dare lay yourselves down for another, and you will find your walls enlarged, your gates opened, your heart made rich with the presence of many beautiful souls. Weave your life into others so your single strand of thread has a myriad of color braided into it, thus creating something more than your one lonely life. Your single strand will have to weave, bend, and give to allow other strands to wrap themselves around it. It will feel smothered at times, will feel lost as it's wrapped round and round again. But in the end, it's blended into a beautiful tapestry of color made possible only by given love. We drive ahead of the blazing sunset, and I keep turning my head to stare at its vibrant color. Just one Sunday, my friend and I stood at the well-lit tree in the church sanctuary and held our stomachs as we imagined our own little ones, cold and hungry, like the refugee mothers' kids we were concerned about. Embrace the pain of another, and you end up holding more love than if you'd hung on to yourself for the love of your own life. Dare take up those papers for foster care. Dare travel to a refugee camp to dish up soup. Dare write that large amount on your check rather than the smaller one. Dare tell your kids that the floor under the tree will be less loaded with gifts so that one more child will have a warm blanket to sleep with. Dare do away with the talk and walk the walk, because when you do away with your own life, you end up truly finding life. When you refuse to hang your one strand of thread alone, you reach out and pull more strands into your own life, and you end up with more heart. Hearts meshed together in all their need and brokenness create a circle, a union of sorts. We were made to live together. Dare unveil your broken places to another, because you dare believe that nothing is meant to stay broken, and in Christ all things are whole, including you, including them. Hold out your heart, then hold out your hand. Give an extra squeeze next time you're in the crowd. Write that note when the thought comes to mind. Pull that pair of cozy socks off the shelf and hand them to another in a simple brown bag. When walls are up, don't be afraid. It's okay not to penetrate someone's mask. It's not okay to pass them by. Living given love means we view all people as valuable, and difficult places only call for more soul-gazing. Perhaps the walls are up because no one has ever seen clear through to the heart. Perhaps they've never felt given love. Perhaps they don't even know why they live like they do. Perhaps God wants to give you wisdom on how to reach the deepest places that began formation long before they were even aware. Blindness is a soul unaware of freedom. If you see clearly, grab the hand and guide them to light. Love encapsulates our posture before the cross and seals our business with Christ. The lady waiting in the emergency room for her aging mother looks weary and tired. I whispered it to her. You are doing an amazing thing. I admire you. She's living given love despite the difficulty. Her soul is rich, her heart paved with thoughts of Christ. In all of it, her life will become the better for living given. Stretch out your hands to others, and in some odd way you will find your hands filled in the very act of giving it all away. Wrap another's need and brokenness around your own heart, and you will find the thread of your life not to be alone and spent, but rich and beautiful. Women all around and through your single strand will be many other strands, and together they will create a beautiful weave all through your life. Father, thank you that living, given love only causes our hearts to be more full of it. Amen. In 2014, December, as a matter of fact, I had a sudden cardiac arrest. I was rushed to the hospital, and it was fortunate that I felt it coming on. I knew I was really, really in trouble. I was home alone. I called 911. I was having extreme difficulty breathing to the extent that I couldn't even talk to tell them who I was. But because I was calling on my home landline, not a cell phone, they knew who I was and where I was. And the postal lady happened to come by with a package for me that day, which normally she wouldn't have come to the door. But I flagged her down and she came in and sat with me until the ambulance arrived. Initially, they had attributed my sudden cardiac arrest to broken heart syndrome, also known as Takotsubo. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. Takotsubo cardiomyopathy. It's spelled Takotsubu, B as in boy, O. And that is actually what they call in Japan an octopus pot. They catch the octopus in these vessels. The shape is what the cardiologist sees on their images when they do the tests on your heart. Well, when they checked mine, it didn't have that octopus vessel shape, that Takotsubo, that was indicative of this condition. But the loss of my son a few years before, they felt that physical stress may have caused it. Even so, they weren't sure. They said it was pretty much basically the diagnosis was idiopathic. They don't know. I found out a lot about that, and it typically affects the left ventricle, which is where my issues are. And it also happens more often, like 90% of the cases, are in women that are like 58 years and older. Menopausal seems to be more frequent in women that have had the hormonal changes of menopause. Some causes of the broken heart syndrome include sudden drop in blood pressure, serious illness, surgery, or medical procedure, such as a cardiac stress test, severe pain, domestic violence, asthma attack, receiving bad news, such as a diagnosis of cancer, car or other accident, unexplained loss, illness, or injury of a close relative, friend, or pet, a fierce argument, financial loss, intense fear, public speaking, or even a surprise party or other sudden surprise. These can all trigger what they know as a heart attack. Now, mine was a sudden cardiac arrest, and they refer to it as it's indistinguishable from those of a heart attack because a heart attack is different. My situation as a sudden cardiac arrest involves the nervous system. It is all about the electrical aspect of the heart. A heart attack, on the other hand, is the musculature and the veins and whether or not you've got clogged arteries. Now, when they examined my arteries, they told me I had the best arteries, the ones to beat in town. I had cleanest arteries they'd ever seen. I believe that is because of the Ehlers-Danlos. I believe my version of Ehlers-Danlos, if you will, version, is the cardiovascular version. The cardiovascular version in Ehlers-Danlos causes changes in the elasticity of the blood vessels. And I believe that's maybe why they saw that. I've not been diagnosed formally with that. But my father died at the age of 80 with his heart walls rupturing after they gave him a new drug. And the thing is some drugs will elongate what is known as the QT part of the EKG. The EKG is the electrocardiogram they do on your heart that has little wiggly lines that, you always see on the TV, on the monitors. Well, there's part of that is different letters that they use to refer to the various segments of that little wave. And they will indicate a certain prolongation of part of the wave, of the QT section of that wave, is synonymous typically with people with nervous system electrical issues such as left bundle branch block. And I believe it may also apply to the right bundle branch block. When I had recovered from my buster gut and I went back into the cardiologist for one of my routine checkups, at that time I had the head of cardiology as my doctor because I was considered in heart failure at the time when I had my heart condition. Well, I went back in after the buster gut, and he was on to my case saying, if you don't take your medicines, you won't be eligible for a heart transplant. I was really taken aback. Nobody had even said anything to me about something like that. And I had no plans on having a heart transplant. I told that doctor, I said, who asked me if I wanted a heart transplant? The doctor was a little surprised. I think they're used to people just doing whatever the doctor wants them to do for fear of dying. I told that doctor, you know what? I don't want a heart transplant. I have the heart that God gave me, and that's the heart that I want to keep. I said, if I were to die because of a heart condition, it's my time, and I'm looking forward to meeting Jesus. It'll be a great day in heaven when I get to meet him. He was a little surprised, even though I think he was Catholic, or at least raised that way. I went on to tell him, I have a cousin. He was the first heart transplant in his state. And the rest of his life, he was on anti-rejection medication. And that meant his immune system was completely enabled. So he couldn't be around anybody much, especially if they had any sniffle, any signs of any disease. He had to avoid them. He ended up getting a quantity of life in years, maybe, if he even lived more than a year, I'm not sure. He didn't have the quality. I told that doctor, I want a quality of life over a quantity. And I told him that the medicines didn't make me feel better. As a matter of fact, they made me feel worse. I didn't know why. I didn't have any answers. All I knew is what my body was telling me. And I had done some research on my condition as a left bundle branch block, and I knew that it correlated with a long QT syndrome. You see, I lost my brother. He was only 52 when he died in his sleep. It was ruled as a heart attack, but I really think it was the long QT syndrome that got him, because the first sign of long QT syndrome is oftentimes sudden cardiac arrest and dying in your sleep. I told that doctor that I wanted to have a referral to the electrophysiology cardiologist in the group so he could do an EKG and determine if my electrical system of my heart indicated that I had long QT syndrome. I think he was really surprised that I even knew what I knew, but knowledge is power, I'm telling you. He gave me the referral, and the doctor that did the EKG determined that I was what he called borderline long QT syndrome. In other words, a stressor, a medication that would prolong the long QT syndrome, or any kind of extreme stress could put me in what is considered torsade de pointe. Torsade de pointe is a French word for an irregular heart rhythm that flutters so fast and can never regain the right rhythm, sending you into a lethal cardiac arrest. This was not something I really wanted to take lightly. And I knew once I got the diagnosis, I became aware of a database. And the doctors didn't tell me about this database. I found it in my research, called Credible Meds. Now, I did a blog post about the broken heart syndrome, and you'll find all the links and the information there. Credible Meds is a database. It's free. Sign up. You have to sign up so they can notify you when something changes in the database. They add new medications all the time, or they find new levels. Maybe it might go from a mild warning to a black box red stop sign warning where you don't take that medicine. They want you to be able to be informed, so you have to register with your name and email address. Prescription to be filled, you can check it before you have it filled. I always, whenever prescribed, ask the doctor and I ask the pharmacist if it is okay to be taking this medication if I have the long QT. But I still look it up. I still do not trust anybody in the medical profession. That's just the way it is. They have lost my trust. So that's my 2 cents on that one. Attitude of gratitude. It's what you learn to find after a near-death experience. It just kind of automatically is a progression. You are thankful that you're alive, and you wake up with a new appreciation of life, of being able to share your experience, to help other people, because it's just part of getting that close to understanding what life is really about. It's about love, agape love, and helping others. That releases the oxytocin that makes you feel so much better. It's the way we're meant to be. Humans were meant to live in a community, to work together, to nurture each other, to help each other, and to build each other up. Today's featured music is by David Celeste. The song is titled Gratified. Enjoy. All information in this podcast or on the website, blog, or in newsletters is for educational purposes only and not intended to be construed as medical advice, diagnosis, or prescription. Please seek the help of a medical professional to get treatment for your particular condition. Thanks for listening to the Lone Zebra podcast. Don't forget to check out the show notes at dianelalomia.substack.com. That's Diane, D-I-A-N-E, Lalomia, Lalomia.substack.com. Music on the podcast is provided by Epidemic Sound. See the show notes for featured music and artists. Don't forget to share this podcast with your family and friends, especially fellow zebras. And don't forget to rate The Lone Zebra on your favorite podcast app so others can find me. Until next time, blessings. Have a great day.